Welcome, everybody. This is the session on Learner-Centered Leadership Lab, and this is all about insights from learner-centered superintendents. It's a little bit of a discussion of the process, a little bit of discussion of each of you and your own learner-centeredness, a couple of challenges that you'll take off during our time together and do some work, and then a lot of time talking to one another. And so we're going to get you into breakout rooms, chatting with each other about learner-centeredness, and hopefully getting opportunities for each of you to share with one another and take some things away by the end of this session. We're going to start, and I'm going to let Tom introduce himself, and then I'll hop in with my intro as well.
Hello, welcome to the session. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tom Rooney, the Superintendent of Schools for Lindsay Unified. I've been a part of the Lindsay learning journey for over 20 years, and the last I'm on my 11th year as a superintendent. So people know us at Lindsay as kind of being radically learner-centered and doing everything to advance the life of empowering and motivating the Lindsay learners. And so we'll talk a little bit about our work today. Glad to have you all.
Thanks, Tom. And my name's Namba. I have been in 3 different systems, transforming from traditional systems to competency-based. I was in Westminster Public Schools. I was in some charter schools down in LA, and then I got the opportunity and privilege to serve alongside Tom in Lindsay Unified for years while at the site and at the district office. I now work as a senior advisor at Transcend, and so I still get spoiled enough to get to work with Tom on a consistent basis, whether it's with leadership or some of the team there in Lindsay. And so happy to be here, happy to share space with each of you today as we talk a little bit more about learner-centeredness. We have some objectives today. The first one being to share the framework that we came up with while we've been running this learner-centered leadership lab and the impact that it can have on conditions of systems. To talk a little bit and learn and engage with one another around our 5 key findings from our learner-centered leadership lab national cohorts, and how leaders can become more learner-centered. Explore a little bit more of yourself, each of you, as learner-centered leaders. Draft your own concept, as we'll get into, of learner-centered leadership and get some feedback from friends, and then meet some new peers and have some fun today. Now's that time. Don't be scared off by all of this interaction with one another either. We get time to chat. We will have engagement today. So here are some options for you. You don't have to do any of these things, but if you'd like to, you can change your name, include where you're from, your pronouns. We do encourage video participation. Like I said, we're going to have you in breakout rooms of like 3. And so if you want to just do audio, great. If you want to get on video, because it's always nice to interact and see each other's beautiful faces, please feel free to do that too. And if not, please feel comfortable to stay as you are.
So like any session and Zoom sessions included, we want to kind of ground ourselves in some common agreements. And so take a look at these. As Nick said, because there'll be some sharing, there'll be some dialogue in groups, and then some share outs, and even some work we're going to have you do in some writing, is we want this to be a safe space, a space of vulnerability, a space where you all can be present to curiously engage in this work of learner-centered leadership exploration, come with a spirit of courage, transparency, and truly being learner-centered. So if you could just drop in the chat a big yes if you're good with these small community agreements. All right, Nick, I'm not seeing any no's, so looks like the folks have signed on. All right.
Not seeing any no's, and you stayed here, and some of you got on camera. Our goal by the end, of course, is to get everybody, by the way, but we'll get there over time.
And we want to start out by just kind of seeing where people are. Where are people with regard to learner-centered leadership? What does that actually mean to you? And so we've got a little manometer here to gather some information to see where we're all at. And so that question is, what is learner-centered leadership? Just click on there, use the QR code, and we'll show the results.
And we see you, Ashley. Thank you for coming on video. Thank you. I'll pause here just for a moment to get everybody this Menti.com and the number. It'll be on the next slide too, so don't worry in case you missed it. Now, whether it's on your phone or whether it's on your computer, on Menti.com, and you have up there the number, as soon as you start typing, it's going to come live on here for everybody to see. So don't wait for anybody else's answer. You all have the best answers. Tell us what is learner-centered leadership? Well, please keep them coming too. You can start to see my fear now washed away as the first blocks have started to pop up here. You should also be able to see it on our screen here. Focus on goals, policies, decisions on learner experiences, creating conditions for agency. Conditions for agency, very powerful. Commitment to learning and use. See that your name isn't up here either, so no fear here. Just drop in what you think around learner-centered leadership.
Love that one. Listening to the learners. How often do we do that?
Our goal here is to make this thing scroll. Come on, people. I know you got more in you. A couple more.
Even if you've done one, you can do another, right?
Lead learner, modeling behaviors for other learners too. Very good. All right, I don't want to steal all our opportunities to scroll. Don't worry, if you didn't get in there, you're going to have another chance later.
So those are some excellent kind of grounding and prompting us and getting us thinking about this thing called learner-centered leadership. And what does it mean to be learner-centered? And so our session today is really to, one is to introduce you to this work that Lindsay and Transcend have been engaged in for the last 3 years. This work that has now become known as the Learner-Centered Leadership Lab. We began to kind of really unpack and discuss and almost just informally engage in this work around what does transformational systems change require, and in order to do it in a way that is deeply learner-centered. And we just were having very casual conversations around that, and we began to really go a little deeper as a team and commit to say, well, what is it really take? What are the dispositions, the actions, what does a leader need to do to truly be learner-centered, to truly create the conditions for the learners in their systems to thrive? And while there's so many people in leadership roles, and whether it's a learner, whether it's a learning facilitator, whether it's a school site leader, whether it's a district leader, there's so many people in leadership who know who they are in their core, they know what they believe, but they can't always find the time to deepen and explore and to go further into what they believe, and so that what they believe can truly impact the learners that they serve. Because they get caught up in a lot of different things, whether it's politics or whether it's money decision-making or whether it's personnel matters or whether it's just a lot of variety of things. And so we began this lab in order to create a space for people who generally embrace the concept of learner-centeredness, who wanted a safe space to go deeper in themselves as leaders, to explore their core, to truly unpack who they are in their core and what they believe, in order to truly and more effectively influence the leaders and the learners in their care. And so we started this work. We began some design work. We are now in our 3rd national cohort. in a national corridor. I mean, but we have systems leaders from throughout the nation who have participated in this. This is our third cohort, and we also have 3 local cohorts that are operating essentially within individual school districts, and it essentially as you'll be exposed to what our framework is. It takes all of the participants through the elements of the framework, particularly the exploring their core and developing a concept. So today we're going to actually take you through like a little mini part of what the lab experience is, and that's developing your concept.
And so you might be saying to yourself, 3 years, that's right. 3 years ago, we didn't have a framework. So what we aren't claiming here is any kind of like perfection or yes, we figured this out. Absolutely not. Hey, Kayla, thank you for coming on video. Yes, if you come on video, you get a personal shout out in this thing too. I see you too, Allison. You've been there the whole time. We appreciate it. We are coming from a place of learning. It's a 3-year journey. We have been also doing research along this whole time too. And so anything that we're learning and gathering, this is what we're putting back out into the world. And so this is going to be a very brief, just kind of walk through of what is this framework, where we're at now, or what we're starting to see anyway. So at the center of our framework, you're going to notice that people, learner-centered leaders lead from their core. What that is who they are as a person. What type of person do you show up as? Why do you make your decisions? How do you make those decisions? Those are part of your core as a leader, and that's at the dead center of our framework. Next is your intentional concept. So the way in which you lead, some people think of this as like your leadership theory of action. You have your core, and then you need to enact that core to actually lead through your concept as a learner-centered leader. The next thing is you have these competencies. So you have your core and you lead in a certain way, and you lead in that way because you have this set of competencies and these skills and mindsets and dispositions to be able to do this work. And when you're doing that work, it's going to impact the conditions of your system, however large that system is, however small that system is. But this is in service of nurturing those conditions to make sure that we can impact the greater field at large. And lastly, you're constantly navigating context. You're going to notice when we show you the visual, this is the cliffhanger, right? When we show you the visual, you're going to notice that context looks slightly different than everything else too. And we'll give a little bit of a preface as to why that might actually be that way. All in all, what we want to emphasize is this is ongoing, dynamic processes of growth. This isn't static. This framework isn't meant to be, although the lines are very clean and pure. It's a great graphic designer designed it, but it's messy. It's not as clean as it is. There are chunks and holes, and there are cuts through lines and all of those pieces of things. And so we want to send this symbol that it is a process of growth. You put all those things together, and here's what that visual looks like. I am a primary educator at heart, and so you know I can't come here without a visual for you to tap into. Notice again, this is a constant cycle of reflect and act, but it is starting at the core, like we talked about, enacting that concept through the competencies, which impact the conditions. And there's that squiggly line of context on the outside, as again, we talk a little bit about how constantly and ever-changing this can be. It is unpredictable. Elections coming up in at the beginning of November. This changes people's context almost overnight, instantaneously. There's many different instances that can change context. And so that's why you see that one slightly more wiggly than the rest of these things. What we want to do is just pause, give you a minute to absorb this. And I'd love for you to just like identify for yourself some of your values that are in your core. Think to yourself, like, who are you at the center? Ask or wonder any of the questions in relationship to this framework, and just give you a minute to absorb. So we're gonna have lots of time to talk to one another about this. I see you, Anna. Thank you for coming on visual for us. Beautiful. We're gonna talk a little bit about this, but one thing that we constantly are asked anyway, so we just wanted to put out there, how is this different than any other community of practice that exists for superintendents or assistant supes that are out there? And I think a couple of things that we've heard so far is, in a true sense of learner-centeredness, there is a community and a network that these superintendents feel like they don't often have reach to the people that are living the same type of experience through this framework as they do. And so that's one thing, but there's also some other pieces that are actually happening during the labs. And so this is an opportunity for learner-centered leaders. So far, again, most of the national has been with assistant supes or superintendents, but this is where they're getting a chance to validate and strengthen their core. How many times have you met a superintendent that, if you actually ask them, like, how often do you get to step back and think about yourself as a learner-centered leader? Chances are a lot of those moments would, a lot of the people would say not very often, right? They're constantly trying to help other people lead their systems to be the best leader, and often not telling us that they're able to actually have time to do that themselves. So this is to pause, to validate the strength in their core. They're also, we're going to get into this in a minute with Tom, but help them articulate their concept. And we're going to take you through this. You see the asterisk there. This is concept articulation is the backbone. If you don't know your theory of action as a leader, thank you, Rachel, for coming on visual. Then, how is it that you're going to lead? And so this helps them articulate it sometimes for the first time. Some people have had that experience before. We're really trying to think about, I'm articulating, I am this type of leader, which means I'm growing in this competency, or I need to grow in this competency so that I can grow in the conditions inside of the context that I'm working in. And then it's providing them this warm, welcoming, safe environment. And when we say warm, welcoming, and safe, I think there's a version of that that's like, oh, that's nice. But what we mean is like truly, I won't even hold back from saying, like, we didn't know 3 years ago if we could get to a level of vulnerability with leaders, virtual only. And I think that what we found is, like, within a session, these leaders, because they knew each other so well in the moments and the experience that we were together, they are pouring themselves out and being heard and seen from each other in ways that many of them has told us have been more meaningful than most of the other communities of practice that they have. And so I think that is the level of vulnerability is just real and deep with the groups that are coming through the lab.
Nick, I'm going to go off script a little bit. I'm just going to ask you to go back a couple of slides if you could. Sorry. We got a small group
always
here.
Fun. This is always fun, friends.
Yeah, it's great. We've got a small group, but one more slide. And because I wanted to make sure everybody has a time to look at this framework again. And when you look at this framework, I kind of just put a question out there and maybe just a quick response in the chat. Which of these, whether it's core, concept, competencies, conditions, context, which of these do you think are the most, just pick one of them, which is the kind of the most critical in leaders becoming truly learner-centered or living as a learner-centered leader? Just put one of those in the chat. We'll just kind of watch those populate. Concept, core, concept, core, conditions, grants being different. Okay, core as moral purpose, core, very good. So, and I would just have to say, just from my experience, I'm going to have to agree with you core folks, because if we don't know who we are deep inside and what our values, our motivations, our dispositions are, and we are not constantly living to that core and referencing that core as we are developing our concept or employing competencies that we've developed or facing the conditions or a constantly changing context, it still comes back to that core. And I want to just reiterate the power of the Learner-Centered Leadership Lab, the power of this experience that Nick is talking about around a space of vulnerability, a space of transparency, a space of deep level learning. That's the unique piece of this experience for systems leaders. We have systems leaders from significantly large districts in this nation to very small districts in this nation who have come to the lab experience and have really opened up in this space because they really unpacked and looked at their core once again in a way that they haven't in a long, long time because of the busyness and the noise around them. They stopped, They looked at their core, and that created the space of fully opening ourselves up to levels of vulnerability that is so healthy to a leader's development. So I just want to kind of, you mentioned the vulnerability piece. I wanted to stress that, and you can come back to this. And I want you all to become more and more familiar with this framework, because it's been a powerful element of transformation for those who have participated. Okay, so now we're going to get into concept articulation. So while I believe the core is the heart of it all, the concept articulation is clearly the backbone of the experience. Okay, and what we do in the experience is we support the leaders to articulate their concept. Okay, and so that they can grow their competencies and enable them to grow their conditions and face the contexts that are constantly changing. So on the next slide, we're going to give you a model of what this actually looks like. Okay, so this is our, frame for which we're going to actually have you fill out. Okay, and what we mean by concept is we mean your personal theory of action of learner-centered leadership. And I know in the lab experience, people would say this frame was extremely helpful for them to articulate their concept. Starting out, I'm just going to walk you through each piece, because you're going to go on your own. You're going to work on this for amount of time in a few minutes. What do you, or might you, intentionally, heartfeltly, and concurrently do? Okay, so what do you actually do? And so you're going to list, because I do these things. You're going to list 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 bullets. Because I do these things, it enables the others in my system to become more learner-centered. So when I do these things as the learner-centered leader, it results in these things happening for other people, which ultimately leads to that third box, so that these conditions, we can grow the conditions for learners to experience more equitable, extraordinary learning environments, learner-centered environments. And so this is about you. What do you do as a learner-centered leader that it results in something that ultimately impacts the system? So we mentioned that learner-centered leadership is extremely powerful for systems transformation. Participation in a lab experiences is extremely critical for systems transformation. This is why, because the concept becomes so clear, and because the influence that it has throughout the system. So on the next slide, it's going to show my own personal concept. Okay, and I'm going to just read through this with you, and keep in mind that I did not have a 6-minute breakout session like you're going to get to create this. Okay, I was part of, I was able to iterate this on multiple times with feedback from people and so forth. But it doesn't mean that you can't, in this short time we're together, that you can't get a good draft going. Okay, a good draft of your concept, of your personal theory of action around learner-centered leadership. So this is Tom Rooney. Because I fully embrace and live a mindset of service to the learners in my care, and because I listen to and I value the voice of learners, and I consistently and passionately engage in thinking and action, which demands a commitment to do what is best for learners, and because I advance a healthy culture of empowered leadership at all levels. This results in my own personal convictions related to learner-centeredness to influence and transform the collective dispositions and actions of the learning community that we serve, and we are founded in and driven by in the ever-changing needs of the learners in our care. It shifted from what do I do as a learner-centered leader to what does it cause for the community, the dispositions and actions of the learner community, so that we are founded in and driven by the ever-changing needs of the learners in our care. So myself as a system leader, myself as a learner-centered leader, really impacting others in the system, which ultimately leads to an empowered learning community that does whatever is necessary for all learners to personally thrive and succeed in their current and long-term life aspirations. So this concept articulation of myself as a learner-centered leader leads to that for Lindsay learners and for Lindsay community. And so when we think of leaders, and whether you're working with, or you are a systems leader, or a person who worked with site level leaders, ultimately this concept articulation is powerful for the influence of everyone. And that last part at the very bottom is so critical, because in the end, for me, I want to hear, what do my Lindsay learners say? What does their voice say as they experience the learner-centeredness that we have created for them as a community? And what I want the voice of the Lindsay learners to say is, the Lindsay Unified community gave me what I needed when I needed it. And now I am prepared for the opportunities for today in the life that will unfold before me in the years to come. It all started with me taking the time in the lab to unpack and develop a concept. So we are going to have you basically join this link here. There's a bit.ly that you want to go to, and we're going to give, I believe, 6 minutes for everybody to draft your own concept. Okay. Before we hop off, we're just going to, we're going to have you go off on your own and work on your own, make sure see if there's any questions we want to open that up to, but don't worry, don't think about it too hard. Don't try to come up with some elaborate thing that Tom Rooney just read to you. I worked on that a ton. We simply want you to get a draft going of what is your concept, your theory of action of learner-centered leadership. Nick, you want to
no, just so you know, we're not tracking these. We don't have a container of these on the back end. We're not going to go back into them. This is solely for you all to really process through and wonder for this concept development. Like, what is this? And again, don't put pressure on yourself. We're literally giving you 6 minutes, and I'm probably going to make it 5. We're giving you a few minutes here to just get started and think and wonder, just for yourself to be able to wrestle with this question. If anybody has any technical difficulty, just chat me or let me know, and I'm happy to support you. All right, we know that it's hard and that you need more time, but we also know that you didn't come to just sit and independently work during this time by yourself. So we're gonna keep on moving forward here. Please remember that that is not your final version. That's probably not even fully complete yet, but it's hopefully a jump start for you. As Tom said before, the concept articulation is the backbone. If you don't get a chance to really think about the things that you do, how that eventually leads over to the system that you're trying to create, then chances are there's a lot of tasks being done, but potentially not actually aligned to who you are as a learner-centered leader, and therefore they can get distracted, or it can be misaligned with where you're actually trying to get your system or the system that you're a part of. So now is the hardest part, because we actually try and pull people from their off camera of typing to back to their on camera as on cue. Rachel, that was phenomenal. Well done. And we'll shift into the next part. And here's why this part is so important. So we need Susan to know how seriously we take our guidelines when we do these things. We have lots of engagement happen for the next 5 cycles. So we're about to go into 5 different rounds of what we've heard from the first 2 years. Again, we're in our 3rd. We'll actually be completing it here by December. But we don't have findings until we end the thing and then compile all the research and all those components and go through hundreds of transcripts of minutes of audios. The research continues and it will continue to move forward. But what we're going to do is now give you an opportunity. You're going to get a chance to respond to some questions in small groups of about 3 or 4 people. In these small groups, you're literally going to have 3 minutes total. And so I need to be really explicit, because some people could take 3 minutes just saying, hi, my name's Nick, and this is where I'm from. And that's not the goal. You actually have to get, hi, my name's Nick, this is where I'm from and what I do. And 2 other people have to do that. And you have a question to talk about in 3 minutes. And so in 3 minutes, you do the quick chat, you say, nice to meet you. And then I'm going to jolt you back, just like every Zoom meeting does. And then we're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to send you right back out. It's going to feel like I don't know, like we're doing a jigsaw in a room together, hopefully. And this is as close as we can get to that at the moment. And so we're going to jump into talk about these 5 findings, get some conversation with your colleagues, pull you back, and then get you right back out into some more conversations. All right, the first one we're going to talk about a little bit is 2 questions with your group. how are you listening to your learners? So currently, how are you listening to
Nick, just
your,
jump in. You want to
yes.
share? I think your screen isn't sharing the way you think it is.
Oh, do you not see my slides?
Nope. Well, we can see your slide, but it's no. I think you're on your screen.
We're seeing your whole desktop right now.
There you go.
Is it? So it's not the right slides. Great. You can see my kids though. That's almost better than the slides.
Cool. That was cool.
All right, let's see. I think you want this one. How's that? Now do you see a number one? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Again, the number one is not as cute as my kids. All right. The first set of questions you'll go out into your small group and talk about is how are you listening to your learners? And the second question is, how often do you talk to a wide variety of learners in your district or districts and hear about their hopes, their dreams, their joys, their frustrations, their problems and solutions? Again, all of these are going to be linked to a message that we're hearing from findings from our first 2 years of running this lab. But what we want to do is provide you all a chance to just ponder and think about these 2 questions as you jump into these groups. So I'm going to use the automatic feature. I don't know where you're all going and I don't know who you're talking to, but you're going to go and talk to 2 other people in this mix. So we will pull you back in 3 minutes.
We have just about everybody back. Only had 1 or 2 come back initially, and I was thinking, oh, Nick, they dumped us. They all left us already at the breakout. So we're glad you came back, and it looked like the group might have even increased by 1. So glad to have you back. So just about a couple of, we're a small enough group. We figured just 1 or 2 people just to kind of unmic and what is something that came out of your group that maybe was profound or is kind of stick with you around this? How are we listening to learners, and how often? This is the time to be courageous.
I'll just jump in and say one thing that stood out in our little conversation was folks who are in the classroom have a lot of opportunity to listen to learners. And, I work in SEA. I never have formal time talking to learners.
Great point, Anna. Thank you for sharing. I want to make a comment about that in a second. Somebody else.
I'll jump in something I heard. It's related to what Anna said around the state perspective. Someone in our group talked about how modeling the process for a portrait of a graduate has engaged communities from the state perspective to be able to listen to learners. So I appreciated hearing that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that to both Abby and Anna, what you're sharing is like, sometimes the roles that leaders are in, you're not in a position to listen to learners like you might be if you're at the site level or even at a district. And so kind of recognizing, so what are those avenues for us to actually listen to what learners really want? Because whether we're developing policy or supporting systems change or developing leaders, listening to what learners really want is essential, no matter what our role is, if we're truly learner-centered. So thank you for sharing in that dialogue. So one of the findings here of what do learner-centered leaders do is learner-centered leaders listen to learners of all ages. Imagine that, right? They actually take the time to listen to learners because it's the voice of the learners that actually tell us so much about what they need, and they actually solve a lot of our problems. And some backing of the research that we're doing is just a statement here. If we're truly learner-centered, our work should be centered on asking kids what they want and need, not what we think they want and need. And how many leaders do we know that we're either supporting or we're guiding or that we are engaged with that actually listen to the voice of learners? And learner-centered leaders truly engage in that. So that's clearly a finding. I would just tell you from my own experience as a superintendent, it's very important to me to listen to learners, and I go out and I know this past fall, I conduct empathy interviews periodically. just checking in with learners and like, how are you doing and what can we do better for you? And sometimes they're random learners and sometimes they're somebody who wants to talk to the superintendent or whatever. And so it's always such an enriching experience to sit down on a bench outside or wherever it might be and listen to a learner tell me what they really need. And it was very interesting. This past fall, I was sitting with a learner and having an empathy interview, and she said, you know what I want, Mr. Rooney? And I'm like, well, what? Because I want your job. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, I want to be the superintendent of Lindsay one of these days. And I was inspired by her. And I said, well, do you know what that takes? And do you know what you need to do? And it was just a powerful, and I never would have experienced that. I never would have known that about that learner and how important that was to her if I didn't actually take the time to do that. So again, learner-centered leaders that we are finding, and those who participate in the lab find themselves going out and listening to learners at a more powerful and a deeper level than they ever have before. So next breakout that we're going to take you into is these series of this question here. Okay, and I think these will be randomized again, so you might be with different people. How are you analyzing all your systems, structures, policies, and behaviors so that your actions, decisions are agile enough to meet the needs of all learners? Nick has dropped that in the chat. Okay, so process that. And again, say hello, get into the dialogue. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Okay. And again, just looking, I hope you had some good conversation around this, around your analyzation of system structures, policies, behaviors, so that your actions are agile enough to meet the needs of all learners. So somebody share out, come off mute. And what'd you hear somebody say in your group?
I'll go ahead and share. In my group, I heard another person say that given that so many pieces and parts of our system are a little bit archaic and are just there because they've always been there, that one of the strategies they have is to question the status quo and honor and allow others to do the same thing, and to really drill down why certain conditions or things are in place that that they can then evaluate and see if they're going to, maybe they need to change, and that's okay.
Powerful. Rochelle, you're correct.
Close, Rachel.
Rachel,
Yep.
Rachel, thank you for sharing, and just powerful. How, and if you think about the key piece around questioning or challenging the status quo and empowering others to do the same, that's the key piece right there. It's not just the voice of one person, the leader or whoever it might be, who's kind of pushing up against it, but it's actually empowering people to say, why do we do it like this? Really what's best for learners? And why do we have this dang policy here? Is this really going to help our learners? Why do we even have this system of whatever it might be, right? And so just that piece of empowerment of others to really question that. So in Lindsay, one little example that we have, and this is basically what the research of the Learner-Centered Leadership Lab is telling us, is that learner-centered leadership make decisions to serve all learners. Okay, they make decisions to serve all learners, and some evidence of that is we have a quote of somebody saying we have to ask as a part of everyday work, how is this going to benefit the children? That has to be the defining question. Why is this important? What difference will this make for children? Everyone needs to know how their work ultimately impacts children. Everything we do has to be about the kids. And I've been fortunate enough to work in Lindsay, where I think this quote could really be part of how we live, and part of how so many people embrace our work towards Lindsay learners. And one particular area, which I know maybe at the state level or at the district level or at a variety of different levels, where many organizations struggle, is with the board. The board is not always learner-centered. Okay, we see all this in the nation right now with plenty of stuff in the politics, and you have to ask, what does that have to do with learners? Do you really care about the learners in your care? And so, so in Lindsay, one of the fortunate things that we have is we have some, our board members are truly learner-centered. but they've been developed to be learner-centered. And if you imagine what that enables us as learner-centered leaders in our organization to do, simply because the board themselves are learner-centered. There's a statement in our that says politics do not enter the space of the boardroom. We make decisions based on the needs and the aspirations of Lindsay learners, some version of that. And it's just so powerful because I've seen trustees look across the dais at each other, and I don't have to do anything as a superintendent, but they look across at each other and they say, and what does that have to do for learners? And how is that going to really help us advance the mission and vision for our learners? And to me, that's very powerful. So remember that learner-centered leaders make decisions to serve all learners throughout the entire organization. Okay.
Thanks, Tom. All right, for your third question, what actions are you taking to show that you are not only continuously open to learning, but making your learning visible to all? Just like last time, we'll drop it into the chat. We'll open the rooms, different rooms. Enjoy your new friends and your 3 minutes. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that lengthy discussion. I really am sorry. I know some people are getting cut off here. So I hope that you are having some good discussion. We love a good cold call. Hey, Grant, this is the benefit of being an old colleague. I'd love to hear from you on what you or anybody else that you were speaking with talked to in regards to the actions you're taking to show this.
So I had a good discussion in the 3 minutes. But one of the things that I shared, because I can remember mine better for some reason, just because I shared it, is we involve learners in some of our day-to-day decisions, and then we celebrate the success that comes out of that. In other words, we make decisions all day long. I use transportation, for example. We had some challenges with transportation, brought a learner in that was having some issues with that, and able to collaborate. I let them know, hey, I'm learning this along with you. Let's solve this together. And once we solved it, we celebrated together. And that's just an example. We've done it with facilities. We've done it with other areas that would normally just be adult-driven, adult-centered decisions. It's giving them the opportunities to be part of that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you so much. If you want proof, by the way, go on Twitter. Grant was, tweeting the other day about nutrition services. He's on there and his smiling face and smiling kids. Promise you. So this third finding, be the chief learner. You can't be the chief learner though if nobody else knows that you're not actually doing the learning. Like, it's not a hidden. You don't need to. I think the message that we're sending here is you don't need to convince everybody else you don't need to learn. And honestly, I think in a lot of places that we speak with, people would say the superintendent knows everything, right? That's the assumption. The reality is they need to be able to show that they are also a learner. So here we see, as the lead learner in a budding learner-centered environment, I'm responsible for creating the conditions, safeguards, and commitments, as well as modeling the behaviors that will enable people to show up in the way that we desire. And if you don't want people to show up trying to have perfectionist tendencies, then you can't exude that. And that means you need to help people see the way in which you are learning on a consistent basis. So this is us into our third finding of be the chief learner. All right, moving into number 4. The question that you will speak to with your group: how are you intentionally building a culture that encourages both adults and children to be vulnerable as learners, which includes reflecting, admitting mistakes and failures, and sharing learnings? Again, this should be a somewhat mixed group, but at this point in time, you're getting close to looping back with somebody that you have already spent some time with. So if you have already spent some time with somebody, you don't have to introduce yourself again. All right, we're going to drop you into the group. We're going to have you share for 3 minutes, and then we'll see you back.
Right, did we lose Nick? Are you there, Nick?
I'm back now. I got to get everything back set up. And so let me pull all of that stuff back up. Zoom just quit on me, friends. This was a great example of being a lead learner. If you want, Tom, just maybe talk a little bit about the example for this one.
Yeah, actually, I think what would be better if we kind of going back to the role of a learner-centered leader truly cultivates a culture of learning and growth. And so that learner-centered leaders intentionally tend to culture They intentionally tend to culture. Maintaining a focus on learning requires psychological safe environments that allow for vulnerability. I'm finding vulnerability to be at the core of learning. What did anybody hear about? What are you doing to cultivate this culture of learning and growth? Because that's true in whether you're working directly with learners or you're working, you're leading the Aurora Institute, Susan Patrick, or somebody else. What are you doing to cultivate this growth for adults to be learners?
I heard someone in my breakout say that as an instructional technology specialist, they're going in and talking to other adults, asking them what they need in order to be able to do their work or troubleshooting with them. And it's a lot of trying. Try this, try that.
Excellent. Asking people what they need. And I know that some people have said before, in my experiences, I've heard this from others too, is when you ask the adults kind of about what they need, they sometimes will, I've heard people tell me, nobody's ever asked me that before. You actually care about my learning, no matter what role I'm in, you care about my learning. And that's what learner-centered leaders do. Learner-centered leaders truly care about the learning of everyone in the organization, every adult, every parent, every trustee, every colleague that's walking with them, and every learner as well. So, as it move forward, it looks like we might have lost Nick. Oh, are you there, Nick? Oh, there you are.
I'm there. Can
Okay,
you see the slides?
Yes.
Perfect.
Not sure if you wanted to provide that example, Nick, or do you want to move on to the next finding?
Yeah, so the example that came through in a lab, a way that this happened, so we are gauging how many of you are interacting with adults versus younger learners here. And so one of our members of our team maybe didn't show up the best way with one of his board members while public in a board meeting, and had to compose himself, go apologize to that board member, and then he came back at the next board meeting and shared with everybody his actions. So it wasn't just like a private apology and then tried to shuffle it under the rug. He actually went out in front of everybody at the next board meeting, apologized, made it known that it shouldn't have happened in the way that it did. Emotions got the best of him. Everything that you would hope that somebody wouldn't have.
Nick freeze up on you all, or it's just me? Froze up on you, the rest of you too?
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. At least he doesn't have one of those. It's not that bad of a look. We've all been on the froze look before where it's a little bit, can be really, really bizarre looking, and his is pretty mild. So semi smile, I guess. So he's got the management of the slides. And so till he comes back on, I'm gonna pivot here a little bit. Okay. And so we're gonna do this a little bit without the slides. Okay. Finding number 5, okay, what we found through the lab is that learner-centered leaders empower and inspire others to become learner-centered leaders. Okay, and we're a small enough group. We're not going to do another breakout group, but we have we've kind of talked about the 5 findings, right? And this is the 5th finding that we've discovered. Essentially, I'll say it again. Learner-centered leaders empower and inspire others to become learner-centered leaders. So let's open that up for a group discussion on how are we inspiring others to be learner-centered leaders? What are we doing to create more learner-centered leaders in whatever your role may be? Come off mute.
I'll go first because I work in the business office, but I oversee multiple departments here in Lindsay. But what I do is I encourage my staff who otherwise wouldn't get out to get and be with learners, just be with them, see what's going on. And just that little thing can help them be more learner centered in their day-to-day tasks, whether they're paying bills or doing payroll, whatever it is. I try to encourage them to get out there, be there with them.
Great. Anyone else?
I can share. In Utah, we have a couple of examples where we have we've just launched our Utah Principal Supervisor Academy. And in that academy, we've asked the principal supervisors to share with us what their needs are. When you shared that example a few minutes ago, it was similar where I don't know that they're asked a lot what their needs are. And so it was nice to get their feedback, and they're in a bit of a vulnerable space where they're learning and growing their skills as principal supervisors. We also have principal partnership networks where principals are coming together as around problems of practice. Excuse me. And that, it's a vulnerable learning space, but with both they're experiencing learner-centered as the learners themselves. And then we also have of course, part of our strategic plan and learner-centered education is braided through everything that we're doing at the state. So those are just a couple of things.
Yeah, wonderful. Those are excellent examples. And because we do have the CEO of the Aurora Institute in our group, I'm just going to ask you, Susan, either within the Aurora Institute or just across the field as you work with people who are learner-centered, because many, many of them. How are people creating and helping others to become more learner-centered? Where are you seeing that?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. At Aurora, a lot of our focus is on policy and research, but when we do these convenings, how do we have everybody on our team really focused on our core value of being student-centered and learner-centered? I think when we do these publicly facing convenings with everybody contributing, we have more than 40% of students presenting in the different sessions. 40% of sessions include students. I think that's one way that we're trying to embody listening to learners authentically. And also I shared this in a breakout group too, but we're also, we've been over time listening to learner-centered leaders about what policy needs they have. And that's really important for guiding our state and federal work, but we're also partnering with community-based organizations to listen to students. And when we're doing school visits, making sure we have ample time with students and listening to what kind of learner experiences they want and what's working for them and what's not, and then analyzing kind of the work that we do through that lens.
Thank you, Susan. It's like you gave us 4 of the 5 findings of the research. You kind of listed 4 of them that you kind of engage in regularly, from listening to the learners, to asking, how are we involving learners? The fact that 40% of these sessions are all learner driven is pretty powerful. 40%, I think, is what you said, right? Mm-hmm. 60 and 40. I mean, that's very powerful. You can't go to many sessions that are places that are that learner centered. So thank you for sharing. I think we're going to move towards a wrap up, and then just making sure we're going to kind of went through this. Nick, I reviewed that part, so we'll just go to the next one. And I think you're going to take us towards a wrap up on making sure people understand more about the lab.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Tom. Let me know if I randomly go off of audio for some reason. My computer chose this moment. Today, we also wanted to talk to you a little bit about what this caused. Everything that you've heard so far, the 5 findings, and then all the other research that we're doing and sharing, and the continuous cohorts that we have, they've spurned a new request. And so some of the superintendents or assistant supes that have gone through the national version said, hey, do you have anything for local, for like my system to experience something like this? It's made me sit, wonder, reflect. It's given me permission to do that. It's forced me to create the space. And I'm really curious what that would be like in my own system. And so we said no, because clearly we didn't. But then we went into a fast version of what would that look like. So as Tom said earlier, we do have 3 learner-centered leadership lab locals running across the country right now from people that were part of their leaders were a part of the national version in the forefront. They're not all identical, as you can imagine. The context is very different across of them. But basically, all of them are moving towards this space where we're trying to help people understand themselves as better as leaders, regardless of the positions that they held inside their systems. At the same time as offering hope that those conditions that they're creating together as leaders can also create strong relationships and vulnerabilities that otherwise wouldn't be shared across both the central office and school sites in the systems that we're wondering. Now, clearly I said we just started because this is the first year we're doing the locals. So I don't have 5 new findings to bring you this year, but you can guarantee a proposal next year with new findings for what we found from our locals. And the other version is just like the request is out there for us to do more of this. And so if you think about this, or if you know of your own systems or other systems that you think would benefit from either hearing about what they're learning, or you're curious about their learning too, we would say we're ready to listen and support other people on this venture at the same time. We wanted to pull this up one more time because we said today as one of our objectives for the days was that you would get to know this framework a little bit more. You would get to ponder about yourself as a leader inside of this framework a little bit more too. Again, really deeply trying to name here, we aren't naming that this is right or this is the thing, but it is starting to spur conversation, deep, meaningful conversation with learner-centered leaders across this country. And we think that that in itself is a deep enough intent and purpose. And we would consider ourselves pretty excited about that. So we hope that you had a chance to dig back and think more about your core concept, competencies, conditions inside of your context.
And Nick,
we will also,
if you go back to that slide one more time, sorry, just to jump in here, just because I want you all to kind of imagine as learner-centered leadership begins to expand, take root, as the lab actually begins to expand and grow, and there's more and more people who participate and want to be a part of it, because that's what we're finding. Imagine more and more systems where the leaders in the system really know and operate from their core. They've developed their theory of action. They have learner-centered competencies to face the conditions, and they influence their conditions no matter what the context is ever. So I just kind of want to just paint that picture. Think of leaders throughout our system. We think about the need for transformation. We think about the need for total school redesign. We think about, and you have spaces of influence, and just imagine in those spaces of influence as learners, if the leaders were truly embracing a framework and living one such as this.
Thank you, Tom. As Tom was talking about, this shift in leadership concepts and how we lead is to shift this new learner-centered paradigm, where learning is customized, it's relevant. Above all else, it's creating more equitable opportunities for learners to be sharing spaces across this country. And we think, as you see, our 5 findings over there in the learner-centered era are the 5 current findings from our national, but we also wanted to label kind of the shift that this can be countered with on the other side, or what these things might look like in the more traditional systems as we know them today. With that, I think, Tom, we also make a couple changes here. We'll have you do this next slide, but then I think we shift away from the Menti. Let's just do questions. Let me stop sharing and just do questions of the whole group. And we were ready just in case, not knowing how many people would be here, but I think the shift is right. Let's just go here.
So what do those who experience the Learner-Centered Leadership Lab walk away with? And this is the closing survey from cohort 1 and the closing survey from cohort 2. So you imagine these are systems leaders from large districts like Dallas and Tulsa and DC to small districts like Northern Cass and Lindsay and a few others that are small, and some medium districts like Cajon Valley. And so these are leaders who came through this experience. And look at what they said. They were grateful. They were fulfilled, inspired, validated. They had connections, commitment, support. Just look at optimistic. They just saw all of this. So think about the leaders again throughout this nation, and how many of them need to have an experience that they walk out like this. And the reality is far too many of them are never allowed, or they don't find the space, the time to participate in something such as the Learner Centered Leadership Lab that will produce this for them. I would say many of them were absolutely blown away and surprised of what their ultimate experience was. So
before we do questions, I would say we're going to skip all those and just let you know, we do have a website with the information, with the blog posts and all that information. So if anybody ever wants any of this, they could also just reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect with people and give them more information. Otherwise, we have scared almost everybody away. So let's stop sharing this and just pause here for a moment where we're happy to entertain any questions, but also any other dialogue if you have questions. Yes, Rachel, I'll grab the link.
If there's no questions, I just kind of want to put something out there, just a kind of a reminder kind of stuff. Is a kind of a little project that started with Lindsay and Transcend. Initially was kind of funded through a federal grant that we had, and we just it's become, honestly, I'll just tell you, it's become much more than we kind of ever thought it was going to become. From the desire for people to have locals, and also just simply for the impact. Like, we walk out of like the first lab or two, the second lab experience, and there's such openness and vulnerability and growth on the part of like really well-known leaders in this nation that are just really encouraging. And so just kind of let you know that it's a continued partnership that will continue. And I think we're just, we're kind of building capacity and developing like next steps to move this forward and scalability, okay, on this whole project, because the need is really great.
We don't want to hold anybody's awkward space of silence. And so also just naming, like, thank you for making it to the end, for all the engagement with each other. I know we're asking for a lot of engagement.
Thank you so much. And I would just ask, we're getting feedback on everything through a really quick 3-minute survey. So for those of you that are still left, if you'd be willing to click on that. But Tom, thank you so much. And Nick, thank you. This was really moving and has me thinking a lot too. And Anna and Rachel and others, Grant, really nice to connect with you too.
Take care. Remember to fill out the survey. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.